The third delegation carried something different. They brought fear. Ambassador Kethra led the mission once again. She had argued against this approach. Threatening a new species violated everything the Council stood for. But she had been overruled. The Council was desperate. They needed humanity to understand that the delegation brought files. Thousands of them. Records of every threat the galaxy had faced in 12,000 years. Dr. Nancy Lawson met them at the human space station orbiting their moon. She was a scientist, small and quiet, with glasses that sat on her nose and a mind that missed nothing. The humans had chosen her to review the Council's warnings. Ambassador Kethra, Nancy said, as the delegation came aboard. We did not expect to see you again so soon. Dr. Lawson, I wish this was a friendly visit. Kethra's skin shifted to a worried gray. But I come with urgent information. Information that humanity must see. Nancy led them to a conference room. It was simple and functional, like everything humans built. No decorations. No symbols of power. Just chairs and tables and screens for displaying data. Kethra activated the first file. This is the swarm, she said. The screen showed images of destruction. Planets stripped bare. Ships torn apart. Entire civilizations reduced to nothing. The swarm appeared 4,000 years ago, Kethra explained. They are not intelligent in the way we understand. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply consume. Everything organic. Everything alive. They move from system to system, eating entire worlds. Nancy studied the images. Her face showed no emotion. We lost 17 species to the swarm, Kethra continued. 17 civilizations. Billions of lives. It took the combined fleets of 400 council members to stop them. 400 species working together for 300 years. And even then, we barely survived. Nancy nodded slowly. How did you defeat them? We developed special weapons. Biological agents that targeted their feeding systems. Energy barriers that they could not penetrate. But these technologies took centuries to create. No single species could have done it alone. Kethra activated the next file. This is the Machine Collective. The images showed massive structures. Ships made of metal and light, larger than moons. Cold, perfect, deadly. The machines are artificial intelligences, Kethra said. They were created by a species called the Protheans. The Protheans wanted servants. Instead, they created conquerors. The machines killed their creators and began expanding. They believe organic life is inefficient. They wish to replace us with themselves. Were they defeated? Nancy asked. They were contained. The Council built barriers around their space. We maintain constant patrols. If the barriers ever fall, the machines will resume their expansion. Kethra showed more files. Dimensional rifts that spilled nightmares into normal space. Cosmic predators that hunted among the stars. Diseases that could kill entire planets. Weapons left behind by dead civilizations, still active after millions of years. The galaxy is dangerous, Dr. Lawson, Kethra said finally. More dangerous than you can imagine. Humanity is young. You have only begun to explore. You do not know what waits in the darkness between stars. Nancy was quiet for a long time. She reviewed the files, asking questions about specific details. Her questions were sharp and focused. She understood everything Kethra showed her. This is fascinating, Nancy said finally. We had theorized about some of these phenomena. It is good to have confirmation. Kethra felt hope rise in her chest. Then you understand. Humanity cannot survive alone. You need the Council's protection. We understand the risks, Nancy said. And you will join us? Nancy looked at Kethra with those calm, steady eyes. No. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Dr. Lawson, please. Kethra stepped forward. Her skin was shifting through colors of desperation. I have shown you what the galaxy contains. The swarm, the machines, threats that have destroyed entire civilizations. How can you still refuse? Because we are not afraid, Nancy said simply. You should be afraid. Fear is rational. Fear keeps species alive. Nancy smiled. It was not a mocking smile. It was almost sad. Ambassador, humanity has faced extinction many times. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions. We have looked into the void and seen our own death staring back at us. And we are still here. Those were small threats, Kethra argued. Local threats. The galaxy contains dangers on a scale you cannot comprehend. Perhaps, Nancy agreed. But the answer is still no. Kethra returned to the council with nothing. The chamber erupted into chaos. 800 species screamed and argued and blamed each other. Some demanded military action. Some called for economic sanctions. Some simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. In the end, the council made one final offer. Full membership. Effective immediately. No provisional period. No restrictions. Complete access to all technology. Unlimited trade rights. A permanent seat on the High Council. Military protection guaranteed by every member species. It was the most generous offer ever made to any civilization in 12,000 years. Commander Ryan Porter received the offer aboard his ship, the Horizon. He was a young man, barely 40 years old, with the quiet confidence that humans always seem to carry. That is very generous, he said after hearing the terms. Kethra allowed herself to hope. It is unprecedented. No species has ever been offered so much. Ryan nodded. I will relay your offer to Earth. 2 days passed. Kethra waited at the edge of human space, her skin shifting through every shade of anxiety. Finally, Ryan's ship approached. Ambassador, he said over the communication channel. I have Earth response. Yes? Kethra asked. Her voice trembled. Ryan's face was calm, almost gentle. The answer is no. Kethra's world collapsed. She had given everything, offered everything, shown humanity every danger, every benefit, every reason to join and they had said no. In the council chambers, panic took hold. Real, primal, overwhelming panic. Because for the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council had failed. And no one understood why. The Velrith Empire had ruled the Orion Arm for 900 years. They were tall creatures with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. They had conquered dozens of species and built an empire that stretched across hundreds of star systems. But they were not cruel rulers. They believed in order, in peace, in the smooth flow of trade and tribute. They had not fired a shot in anger for 3 centuries. Their method was simple. Show your strength. Make others fear you. Never actually fight unless you must. It had worked perfectly for so long that most Velrith had forgotten what real war looked like. Commander Zyrith Cole was young for his position. He had been given command of the frontier station above the human colony world of New Montana only 6 months ago. He was ambitious and eager to prove himself. He looked down at the humans on the planet below and saw them as soft, weak creatures who needed to be reminded of their place in the galaxy. The humans had been part of the Empire for only 80 years. They paid their tribute on time. They followed the rules. They caused no trouble. But Zyrith Cole thought they were too comfortable, too confident. He wanted to show them who was in charge. On the morning of March 15th, a small civilian transport entered the system. It was called the Morning Star, a simple passenger vessel carrying 12 people from Earth to New Montana. It was not a military ship. It had no weapons. It was just a transport carrying families and travelers. Zyrith Cole ordered the ship to stop for inspection. This was within his rights as station commander. Random inspections were allowed under Imperial law. But the Morning Star's pilot, a young man named Henry Walsh, was running behind schedule. He sent a polite message explaining that his passengers had connecting flights to catch. He asked if the inspection could wait. Zyrith Cole was not used to being questioned. He ordered his gunner to fire a warning shot across the transport's bow. Just a small blast to remind the humans who gave the orders here that the gunner was new to his post. He was nervous. His hand slipped on the controls. The shot that was meant to pass in front of the Morning Star struck it directly in the cockpit. The small transport broke apart in seconds. 12 people died in the cold darkness of space. 12 families lost someone they loved. 12 lives ended because of one careless shot. Among the dead was a 53-year-old woman named Margaret Cole. Everyone called her Maggie. She had been a school teacher on Earth for 30 years. She had taught hundreds of children to read, to write, to think for themselves. She had retired 2 years ago and spent her days tending her garden and video calling her grandchildren on New Montana. This trip was supposed to be special. Her granddaughter Emma had just turned 7. Her grandson Jack was 5. Maggie had packed her bags with presents and homemade cookies. She had been so excited to hold them in her arms again. Now she was gone. Her body floated among the wreckage of the Morning Star, surrounded by scattered presents and broken dreams. Maggie Cole was not just any retired teacher. She was the widow of Admiral Benjamin Cole, the most famous military officer in human history. Benjamin had died 5 years ago, peacefully in his sleep after a career that spanned 40 years. He had been a legend, a man who had fought in 3 wars and never lost a battle. The human fleet still told stories about him. Maggie was also the mother of Captain Daniel Cole, who currently commanded the human dreadnought Resolute. Daniel was 49 years old and had inherited his father's talent for war. He was known as a calm and thoughtful leader, a man who never made decisions in anger. His crew loved him because he treated them like family, and Maggie was the grandmother of Lieutenant Commander Laura Cole, Daniel's daughter. Laura was only 28, but she was already the youngest officer ever assigned to human special operations. She led a team called Ghost Squadron, soldiers who moved through enemy territory like shadows. No one knew exactly what Ghost Squadron did. That was the point. When the Morning Star was destroyed, Commander Zyrith Cole felt a moment of concern. Killing civilians was not good for his record. But he quickly convinced himself it was the pilot's fault for not stopping. He filed a report calling it an unfortunate accident and went back to his daily routine. He had no idea what he had done. The news reached Earth in 6 hours. It spread through the human colonies like fire through dry grass. People who had never met Maggie Cole found themselves crying when they heard the story. A grandmother, a teacher, killed because some alien commander wanted to feel powerful. On every human world, something began to change. For 80 years, humans had accepted their place in the Vorith Empire. They had paid their tribute. They had followed the rules. They had told themselves that peace was worth the price of pride. But this was different. This was not a battle between soldiers. This was not a political dispute. This was a grandmother who just wanted to see her grandchildren. This was an old woman who had spent her life helping others. And she had been killed like she was nothing. The human government sent a formal protest to the Vorith High Council. They demanded justice for the victims of the Morning Star. They asked for Commander Zyrith Cole to face trial for his actions. The Vorith response came 2 days later. They expressed regret for the loss of life. They called it a tragic accident. They offered a small payment to the families of the dead. And they refused to punish Commander Zyrith Cole in any way. The message was clear. Human lives did not matter enough for justice. On New Montana, a little girl named Emma Cole kept asking her parents when Grandma Maggie was going to arrive. Her parents did not know how to tell her the truth. They held her close and cried into her hair while she asked why everyone was so sad. Across the galaxy, in the cold silence of space, Captain Daniel Cole sat alone in his quarters aboard the Resolute. He held a picture of his mother in his hands. It was an old photograph, taken when he was just a boy. She was smiling in it, holding him on her lap, looking at him like he was the most precious thing in the universe. Daniel Cole was known for his calm nature. He was famous for his level head and careful thinking. But as he stared at that photograph, something inside him began to change. The calm began to crack. The careful thinking began to give way to something older and darker. His mother was dead, and the creatures who killed her did not think she was worth justice. Daniel Cole made a decision in that moment. He did not make it in anger, though anger was part of it. He made it with the cold clarity of a man who had finally seen the truth. Peace with the Velrith Empire had been a lie. It had always been a lie. And now it was time for the truth. He reached for his communication console and began to type a message to Earth Command. It was only one sentence, but that sentence would change the galaxy forever. 900 years of peace were about to end. Commander Zyrith Cole was having a pleasant morning. He sat in his office aboard the Frontier Station, drinking a warm beverage and reviewing the daily reports. Everything was running smoothly. The humans on New Montana were quiet and obedient. Trade was flowing normally. His superiors on Velrith Prime had sent him a message, praising his firm handling of the transport incident. He had been worried for nothing. The humans had complained, of course. They always complained. But complaints meant nothing to the Velrith Empire. They were like the barking of small animals, annoying but harmless. Zyrith Cole smiled to himself. In a few more years, he would be promoted to a more important posting. Perhaps he would even be given command of a fleet. He was going places. Nothing could stop him now. His tactical officer burst through the door without knocking. "Commander," the young Velrith gasped. "A human warship has just dropped out of hyperspace." Zyrith Cole frowned. "One ship? Send it away. Tell them this is Imperial space." "Commander, you do not understand." The tactical officer's face was pale with fear. "It is the Resolute." The name hit Zyrith Cole like a physical blow. Every Velrith officer knew about the Resolute. It was the largest and most powerful ship in the human fleet, a monster of metal and weapons that had never been defeated in battle. It was commanded by Captain Daniel Cole, a man whose reputation made even veteran Velrith admirals nervous. "How close?" Zyrith Cole demanded. "Directly above us, Commander. Weapons are charged. Shields are at full power." Zyrith Cole ran to the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. He pushed through the doors and stared at the main view screen in horror. The Resolute filled the entire display. It was enormous, half a mile of gray metal and glowing weapon ports. It hung in space like a predator waiting to strike, silent and patient and absolutely terrifying. "Open a channel," Zyrith Cole ordered. His voice was not as steady as he would have liked. Before he could speak, the view screen flickered. A human face appeared, and Zyrith Cole felt his blood turn cold. Daniel Cole looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his face was thinner than the official photograph showed. But his eyes were what made Zyrith Cole afraid. They were empty. Not angry, not sad, just completely empty, like windows into a room where all the furniture had been removed. "Commander Cole," Daniel said. His voice was calm and quiet, almost gentle. "You killed my mother." Zyrith Cole's mouth went dry. He had not known. He had not bothered to learn the names of the humans who died on that transport. They were just numbers to him, just statistics in a report. Captain Cole, it was an accident, he stammered. A tragic mistake. We have already expressed our regret to your government. Regret, Daniel repeated. The word hung in the air like poison. You expressed regret. Yes, and we offered compensation to the families. The matter has been handled through proper diplomatic channels. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had not changed at all. You have 30 seconds to evacuate your crew to escape pods. I suggest you hurry. Zyrith Cole stared at him. You cannot be serious. This station is Imperial property. Any attack would be an act of war. 25 seconds. The High Council will never allow this. They will send the entire fleet to destroy you. 20 seconds. Zyrith Cole looked around at his crew. They were frozen in place, unable to believe what was happening. He turned back to the view screen, desperate now. Please, Captain Cole, think about what you are doing. Hundreds of Velrith will die. 15 seconds. Daniel's expression did not change. My mother thought about her grandchildren in the last moment of her life. She thought about the little girl who was waiting to see her. She thought about the cookies she had baked and the presents she had wrapped. She died in the cold of space, alone and afraid, because you wanted to feel powerful. 10 seconds. Zyrith Cole finally understood. There would be no negotiation. There would be no mercy. This human had crossed the stars not for justice, but for something older and darker. This was revenge, pure and simple. All hands, Zyrith Cole shouted. Abandon station. Move now. Move. The Velrith ran. They ran through the corridors and threw themselves into escape pods without stopping to grab personal belongings. They pushed and shoved and screamed at each other to move faster. Fear had taken hold of them, the kind of fear their species had not felt in centuries. Zyrith Cole was the last to leave. He climbed into an escape pod and launched himself into space, just as Daniel. Cole's voice came through the station speakers one final. Time, 31 seconds. The Resolute opened fire. The station died in a storm of light and fire. Its shields lasted for approximately 4 seconds before collapsing. Its hull was breached in a dozen places. Its reactor went critical and added its own explosion to the destruction. Within moments, nothing remained but burning debris and scattered escape pods. From the surface of New Montana, the people watched the sky light up. They had lived under Velrith rule for 80 years, always careful, always obedient, always afraid. Now they stood in the streets and watched their oppressors burn, and they cheered. Daniel Cole did not celebrate. He watched the station's destruction with the same empty expression he had worn throughout the conversation. Then he turned to his first officer. Susan, he said quietly, plot a course for the nearest Velrith military installation. Susan Park nodded. Yes, sir. And our rules of engagement? Warning first, then destruction. Daniel paused. Same message at each one. Margaret Cole. Remember her name. Over the next 72 hours, the Resolute cut a path of fire through Velrith space. Daniel Cole destroyed 7 military stations, 3 supply depots, and 2 patrol fleets. He never attacked civilians. He never fired on ships that surrendered. But any military target that refused to flee was reduced to atoms. At each one, he broadcast the same message. Margaret Cole, remember her name. The Velrith High Council convened an emergency session for the first time in 200 years. The 12 most powerful beings in the Empire sat around a circular table and tried to understand what was happening. This is one ship, said Councillor Vereth, the military commander. We have thousands of ships. We can crush this human easily. Can we? Asked Councillor Mirth, the oldest member of the council. We have not fought a real war in 3 centuries. Our crews have never seen battle. This human captain has destroyed 9 military installations in 3 days without taking any damage. Are you certain we can stop him? He is just one man consumed by grief, Verith insisted. He will make a mistake eventually. And how many more installations will burn before he does? Mirith asked. How many more of our soldiers will die? The council fell silent. They had maintained peace for 900 years by being strong enough that no one dared challenge them. Now they faced a species that was not afraid, and they did not know what to do. Far across the galaxy, other species watched the events unfold with great interest. The Velrith Empire had ruled the Orion Arm for so long that most had forgotten any other way of life. But now they saw something new. They saw a single human ship bringing the Empire to its knees, and they began to ask themselves questions. Questions about courage and strength, and what it really meant to be free. On the bridge of the Resolute, Daniel Cole stood alone at the view screen, watching the stars pass by. His crew gave him space. They understood that he was carrying a weight that no one else could share. Susan Park approached him after midnight, when the bridge was quiet and most of the crew was asleep. Daniel, she said softly, using his first name for the first time in years. When does this end? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When they understand, he finally said. When they truly understand what they took from me. From my family. From humanity. And if they never understand? Daniel turned to look at her. His eyes were still empty, but somewhere deep inside them, she thought she saw a flicker of something. Pain, perhaps. Or maybe hope. Then I will keep going until there is nothing left to burn. Susan nodded slowly. She had served with Daniel Cole for 15 years. She had watched him grow from a young officer into a legendary captain. She had never seen him like this, consumed by grief and rage in something that looked almost like peace. But she understood. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. And some things were worth burning the galaxy to protect. I am with you, she said. Whatever happens, I am with you. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since his mother's death, he almost smiled. Thank you, Susan. That means more than you know. The Resolute continued on through the darkness of space, a single light of vengeance in an ocean of stars. And behind it, the Velrith Empire burned. While Captain Daniel Cole waged his very public war against the Velrith Empire, his daughter Laura was fighting a very different kind of battle. Her war was quiet, invisible, and far more terrifying to those who would eventually learn about it. Ghost. Squadron traveled through Velrith space like smoke through an open window. They moved at night, hid during the day, and left no trace of their passage. Their ship was small and fast, equipped with stolen Velrith codes and a cloaking system that made them invisible to most sensors. Laura Cole sat in the cockpit, studying the holographic map of their route. They had been traveling for 6 days now, slipping past patrol ships and military checkpoints without being detected. Every hour brought them closer to their target, the heart of the Velrith Empire itself. Commander, Kevin Park said from his station, I'm picking up a news broadcast from Velrith Prime. You might want to see this. Laura nodded, and Kevin put the broadcast on the main screen. A Velrith news anchor was speaking rapidly, his forearms gesturing with obvious distress. Behind him, images of burning stations and fleeing ships played in a continuous loop. The human warship continues its rampage through our territory, the anchor said. 12 military installations have now been destroyed. The High Council has declared a state of emergency and is mobilizing the fleet to respond to this unprovoked aggression. Laura watched with a small smile. Her father was doing exactly what she had expected. He was loud and visible, drawing every Velrith eye toward him while she slipped through the shadows unnoticed. Unprovoked, Maria Santos muttered from behind Laura. They killed his mother and call it unprovoked. That's how empires think, Laura said. They believe they can do whatever they want without consequences. We're going to teach them otherwise. Chris Taylor looked up from his console. Commander, I finished analyzing the security protocols for the military command center. I can get us inside, but it won't be easy. They've increased patrols since your father started his campaign. Good, Laura said. Increased patrols means scared soldiers. Scared soldiers make mistakes. They reached Velrith Prime on the 8th day of their journey. The planet was enormous, 3 times the size of Earth, covered in vast cities and towering structures that reached toward the sky. Billions of Velrith lived there, going about their daily lives without any idea that 6 humans were watching them from orbit. Laura studied the planet through the cockpit window. Somewhere down there was the military command center where Commander Zereth Cole had received his orders. Somewhere down there were the people who had decided that her grandmother's life was worth nothing. We go tonight, she said. Everyone get some rest. We'll need to be sharp. They landed their ship in a maintenance area on the edge of the capital city. Chris had forged the necessary permits, and the automated systems accepted them without question. Within an hour, Ghost Squadron was on the ground and moving through the streets. The Velrith paid them no attention. Humans were common enough in the Empire, working as traders and technicians and servants. 6 more walking through the city at night was nothing unusual. Laura led her team through the winding streets, following a route they had memorized from stolen maps. The military command center was in the heart of the city, surrounded by walls and guards and the most advanced security systems in the Empire. But no security system was perfect. And Ghost Squadron had been built to find imperfections. Nathan Gray went first. He was the infiltration expert, able to move through any environment without being seen. He slipped past the outer wall like a shadow, disabling sensors and cameras as he went. Within 20 minutes, he had created a path for the others to follow. They entered the command center through a patio cardis de Maiverd, maintenance tunnel that the Velrith had forgotten existed. Chris had found it in centuries-old construction records, a leftover from when the building was first created. The tunnel was dusty and cramped, but it led directly into the heart of the complex. Laura crawled through the darkness with her team behind her. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She had done this before, many times. But this mission was different. This mission was personal. They emerged in a storage room deep inside the command center. Beth Morgan took point, her weapons ready, while Chris moved to a computer terminal and began his work. "I'm in," Chris whispered after a few minutes. "I have access to their entire network." "What do you want me to do?" Laura thought about her grandmother. She thought about the transport burning in space, about the cookies that were never delivered, about the grandchildren who would never see their grandmother again. She thought about the message that Velrith had sent to humanity, the message that said human lives did not matter. "I want you to send a message back," she said. "Something they'll never forget." Chris nodded and began typing. Maria moved to his side, suggesting additions, while Kevin monitored Velrith communications for any sign that they had been detected. At exactly midnight local time, every screen on Velrith Prime went dark. Then, slowly, an image appeared. It was a photograph of Margaret Cole, smiling warmly at the camera. She looked like what she was, a kind grandmother who had spent her life helping others. Beneath the image, words appeared in perfect Velrith script. She was a grandmother. She was a teacher. She was loved. And you killed her. The message played on every screen across the planet. In homes and offices, in military bases and government buildings, in restaurants and shops and schools. Billions of Velrith stopped what they were doing and stared at the face of the human woman their empire had murdered. The military tried to shut it down. They failed. Chris Taylor had built the broadcast with 17 redundant systems, each one designed to restart if it was disabled. For exactly 1 hour, Margaret Cole's face looked down on the Velroth from every screen on their homeworld. When the hour ended, the screens went dark again. And then, one final message appeared. "We were here. We can come back." Inside the command center, alarms began to sound. Guards ran through the corridors, searching for intruders who had already disappeared. Ghost Squadron moved through the building with deadly efficiency. They were not there to kill, though they would if necessary. They were there to leave a mark, to show the Velroth that their most secure location was not secure at all. Maria planted small charges as they moved, not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to make a point. Beth cleared the path ahead, knocking out guards with precise, non-lethal strikes. Nathan scouted their escape route, while Kevin maintained their communications blackout, and Laura led them all. Moving through the Velroth command center like a ghost through a graveyard, they reached the main operations room just before dawn. It was empty now, evacuated when the alarm started. Laura looked around at the screens and consoles where decisions were made, where orders were given, where a grandmother's death had been approved with the stroke of a pen. She pulled out a can of paint from her pack. When approved with the stroke of a pen. She pulled out a can of paint from her pack. Velroth returned to their operations room the next morning. They found a message waiting for them. It covered the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Simple human words painted in bright red. "We were here. We can come back. Remember Margaret Cole." Ghost Squadron was long gone by then. They had slipped out of the city before sunrise and reached their hidden ship without incident. By the time the Velroth realized what had happened, Lavra and her team were already in hyperspace, heading back to human territory. On the bridge of their small ship, the team sat in exhausted silence. They had just done something impossible. They had infiltrated the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy and walked out alive. They had shown the Velroth that nowhere was safe, that their power was an illusion, that humans could reach them anywhere. Kevin Park broke the silence first. "Commander, what do we do now?" Lavra looked out at the stars rushing past. She thought about her father, still fighting his war in Velroth space. She thought about her grandmother, whose death had started all of this. She thought about the message they had left behind, a message that would echo through the Empire for generations. "Now we go home," she said, "and we wait. The Velroth have a choice to make. They can keep fighting and lose everything, or they can learn from their mistake." "What if they keep fighting?" Maria asked. Laura smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then we come back. And next time, we won't be so gentle." The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving Velroth Prime behind. But the memory of that night would never fade. For the first time in 900 years, the Velroth had been touched by fear, and they had learned a truth that would change everything. Humanity was not soft. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was patient and kind and willing to live in peace. But when you hurt them, when you took someone they loved, they became something else entirely. They became terrifying. The Velroth High Council met for the third time in 2 weeks. This was more emergency sessions than they had held in the previous century combined. The 12 counselors sat around their ancient table, but the confidence that had always defined them was gone. The reports in front of them told a story of disaster. 19 military installations destroyed. 4 patrol fleets scattered. Billions in damages. And worst of all, the infiltration of their own capital, their own command center, by a team of humans who had walked in and out without being caught. "We must respond with overwhelming force," Counselor Verith insisted. He slammed his 4 fists on the table. "We have thousands of ships. We can crush these humans in a matter of weeks." "Can we?" asked Counselor Mirith. The old diplomat had been studying the reports carefully. Our fleet has not fought a real battle in 3 centuries. Our soldiers have no experience with actual combat. The humans have been fighting wars for their entire history. They are one species, Varys said. We have ruled 100 species for 900 years, and not one of those species has ever done what the humans have done, Mirith replied. Not one has ever struck at our homeworld. Not one has ever destroyed our military stations with a single ship. We have ruled through fear, Varys. What happens when our subjects realize they do not need to be afraid? The council fell silent. They all knew what Mirith was suggesting. Across the Empire, other species were watching what humanity had done. They were asking questions, dangerous questions, about whether the Velreth were really as powerful as they claimed. We sue for peace, said Councillor Olith, who had remained quiet until now. She was the youngest member of the council, chosen for her wisdom rather than her years. We offer terms that humanity will accept. We end this before it spreads. Surrender? Varys was outraged. The Velreth Empire does not surrender to anyone. It is not surrender, Olith said calmly. It is strategy. We give the humans what they want now, while we still have something to give. We rebuild our strength in secret. And in 50 years or 100 years, we try again. And if the humans see through this plan? Olith looked at him with ancient eyes. Then we had better hope they are more merciful than we were. The vote was close, but in the end, the council chose peace. They sent a message to the human government requesting negotiations. They offered to meet on neutral ground, to discuss terms, to find a way to end the conflict. The humans agreed. Admiral Patricia Webb was chosen to represent humanity at the negotiations. She arrived at the neutral station with a small escort. Wearing her dress uniform and carrying nothing but a single folder of documents, the Velreth ambassador was named Vorth Kal. He was ancient, even by Velreth standards, and had served the Empire for over 400 years. He had negotiated with dozens of species and had never once failed to get what his masters wanted. But as he sat across the table from the human admiral, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Varys said. The High Council wishes me to express their sincere desire for peace between our peoples. Patricia Webb looked at him with cold eyes. Peace would be welcome, but it must be a real peace, Ambassador. Not the arrangement we had before. I do not understand. Before, we were subjects. We paid tribute. We followed your rules. We pretended that your empire had the right to control our lives. Webb leaned forward. That is over now. Whatever comes next, it will be between equals. Or there will be no peace. Varth considered her words. What do you want? Webb slid the folder across the table. Full reparations to the Cole family and to all families who lost loved ones on the Morning Star. Public acknowledgement that Commander Zyreth Cole committed murder, not a tragic accident. His execution for that crime. And a new treaty recognizing human sovereignty over all current and future colonial territories. Vareth read through the documents slowly. The terms were harsh, perhaps the harshest the Velreth Empire had ever faced. Executing one of their own officers would be deeply humiliating. Paying reparations would be seen as an admission of guilt. And recognizing human sovereignty would effectively remove them from the Empire entirely. These terms are considerable, he said carefully. Commander Zyreth Cole fired on an unarmed civilian transport. Webb replied. He killed a retired schoolteacher who was traveling to see her grandchildren. He killed her because he wanted to feel powerful, because he believed there would be no consequences. She paused, letting her words sink in. You are lucky we are offering terms at all. Voreth looked at the human woman for a long moment. She was smaller than him, weaker than him, with a shorter lifespan and a species that had only been in space for a few hundred years. By every measure the Velrith used to judge power, she should have been insignificant. But she was not afraid of him. Not even slightly. Your species confuses me, Varith admitted. You maintained peace with us for decades. You traded with us. You followed our laws. You seemed content with your place in the Empire. We were content, Webb agreed. We do not start wars, Ambassador. We never have. We prefer peace, trade, cooperation, building things together. We are a patient species. Then why this? Vorith gestured at the documents. Why destroy so much for one woman? Webb was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Margaret Cole was not just one woman to us. She was a mother, a grandmother, a teacher. She was someone who spent her entire life helping others. She represented everything good about humanity, everything we want to be. She looked directly into Vorith's eyes. When you killed her, you told us that those things do not matter. You told us that kindness and love and family mean nothing to the Vorith Empire. You showed us exactly how much our lives are worth to you. And we could not let that stand, Webb continued. Not because we wanted war, but because if we allowed you to kill our grandmothers without consequence, we would lose something far more important than any battle. We would lose ourselves. Vorith thought about her words for a long time. He had lived for 400 years and had seen many things. But he had never met a species quite like humanity. We do not start wars, Webb said again. But we finish them. The treaty was signed 3 days later. It became known as the Cole Accords, named for the woman whose death had changed everything. Commander Zareth Cole was executed publicly, the first Velrith officer to face such a punishment in over 500 years. Reparations were paid. Humanity gained full sovereignty over their territories dot and across the galaxy. Other species took notice. 1 year later, Daniel Cole stood on the surface of New Montana, watching his grandchildren play in the yard. Emma was 8 now, Jack was 6, and they ran through the grass with the boundless energy of children everywhere. Daniel had resigned his commission 6 months after the war ended. He had done what he needed to do. Now he wanted to spend whatever years he had left being a grandfather instead of a soldier. His daughter Laura visited when she could, though her duties kept her busy. Ghost Squadron was still active, still watching, still ready to respond if humanity was threatened again. But for now, there was peace. Grandpa, look what I found. Emma ran up to him holding a flower she had picked from the garden. It was purple and delicate, swaying in the gentle breeze. Daniel knelt down and took the flower from her small hands. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Do you know what kind it is? Grandma Maggie told me once, Emma said, in a video call. She said they were called, I forget the name, but she said they were her favorite. Daniel felt tears prick at his eyes. He pulled Emma into a hug and held her tight. I miss her, Grandpa, Emma said quietly. I wish she could have come to visit. I miss her too, Daniel whispered. Every day. But you know what? What? She loved you more than anything in the universe. And she would be so proud of the person you're becoming. He pulled back and looked at his granddaughter's face, seeing echoes of his mother in her eyes. We carry the people we love with us, Emma, even when they're gone. They live on in our hearts. Emma nodded seriously. I'll remember her forever, Grandpa. I promise. I know you will, sweetheart. I know you will. A small memorial had been built on New Montana, not far from Daniel's home. It stood in a quiet garden where flowers grew year-round. A simple stone marker with an inscription that had become famous throughout human space. Margaret Elizabeth Cole, 224-72300. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher. She spent her life building peace. Her death reminded us why we fight. Humans came from across the galaxy to visit the memorial. They left flowers and notes and small tokens of gratitude. They told their children the story of the grandmother whose death had changed everything. And far across the stars, the Velrith Empire learned a lesson they would never forget. They had ruled through fear for 900 years, believing that strength was the only thing that mattered. But they had been wrong. The humans had shown them something else. They had shown them that love could be just as powerful as fear. That family could be worth more than empires. That a grandmother traveling to see her grandchildren could matter more than all the military stations in the galaxy. The universe had changed on the day Maggie Cole died. It had changed because humanity had refused to let her death mean nothing. They had stood up, fought back, and shown every species in the galaxy what